I shouldn't be telling you this. In fact, if I had any sense left at all, I'd delete this recording, burn these words, and pretend none of it ever happened. But I can't. Not anymore, because silence won't save me. And maybe, just maybe, if I say it out loud, someone else will listen. Someone else will be smarter than I was. So let me start with the only thing that matters. If you ever get a job at a hospital and they tell you never to go down to the basement after midnight, don't ask why. Don't laugh, don't roll your eyes, just nod and keep your distance. I didn't, and now I can't close my eyes without hearing the echo of what waits down there. You probably think I'm exaggerating. A janitor in a hospital, scared of the basement. It sounds ridiculous, right? I thought so too. I thought it was nothing but a creepy initiation ritual, the kind of workplace joke everyone passes around to mess with the new guy. But there are rules. Rules written down, old and faded, passed from one worker to the next like scripture. And if you ignore them, if you even bend them a little, you'll learn the same lesson I did. Hospitals don't just keep the living inside. I'm not ready to tell you what the rules say. Not yet. You wouldn't believe me if I laid them all out. And besides, once you know, it's already too late. For now, all you need to understand is this. Every word I'm about to share with you happened. It happened in a place you might even recognize, a place you might have visited without thinking twice. A sterile building with buzzing lights and the smell of disinfectant, where people go to be saved, and some never come back out. If you've ever walked down a hospital hallway at night, you know how unnatural the silence feels. It doesn't belong. It presses in on you, filling every corner, as if the walls are holding their breath. Down there in the basement, that silence is alive. It listens. It waits. This is how it started. The job I never should have taken. I wasn't always the kind of guy who'd take a night job at a hospital. Honestly, I never thought I'd work in a hospital at all. But bills don't care what you think you deserve, and neither do landlords. I was behind on rent, scraping by with odd jobs that never lasted, and watching my savings dry up faster than I could refill them. When I saw the posting for a full-time janitor, night shift, hospital benefits included, it felt like the universe was throwing me a bone. The interview was almost laughably short. The HR lady barely looked up from her computer when she asked, "You can handle night hours?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound too desperate. "You don't mind working alone?" "No problem." She glanced at me, a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And you're not squeamish?" That one gave me pause, but I forced the shrug. "I've seen worse." "Good. We need people who last." That was it. No background check, no drug test, just a few questions and a handshake. When I left her office, I already had a uniform, a badge, and a start date. It was unsettling how easy it was, but when you're broke, you don't question a miracle. The first night I walked in, I told myself it was just another job. The hospital smelled like bleach and sickness, sharp and clinical. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering just enough to make me wonder if I was imagining it. Nurses brushed past me in a blur, their faces tight with exhaustion, their scrubs stained with things I didn't want to identify. Everyone looked overworked, too focused on their patients to pay attention to the new gender. My supervisor was a stocky man named Harold. He handed me a mop, a ring of keys, and a clipboard. "Stick to the schedule," he muttered, his voice low like he was half asleep. "Don't wander where you don't belong. The doctors don't like it." I nodded, waiting for more instructions, but that was all he said. As I turned to leave, he added, almost as an afterthought, "If you make it through the first week, you'll be fine." The way he said it, like survival was part of the job description, made me laugh nervously. He didn't laugh back. The janitorial work itself was nothing out of the ordinary. Wiping down waiting rooms, emptying trash bins that smelled of old food and antiseptic, mopping floors where the tile seemed permanently stained. It was the kind of mindless labor that lets your thoughts wander, and I was okay with that. For once in my life, I thought I'd found something steady. It was near the end of my shift when I overheard it. A group of orderlies passed me in the hallway, their voices low but urgent. I caught fragments. New guy. Doesn't know yet. Then one of them noticed me listening. He gave me a tight smile, leaned in as if to whisper a joke, and said, "Don't ask about the basement." Before I could reply, they were gone. I stood there holding my mop, the words buzzing in my head. The basement? What was so special about it? I glanced at my clipboard, flipping through the schedule. Sure enough, there was a whole section labeled B-level maintenance. The times were blank, no tasks listed, just a note scrawled at the bottom, "See supervisor." I told myself it was nothing, probably just restricted storage or a boiler room they didn't want newbies messing with. But the more I thought about it, the more it itched at me. A basement in a hospital is never just a basement. And if they didn't want me asking about it, then I already knew one thing. Sooner or later, I'd have to.
The next night, Harold was waiting for me in the janitor's closet, arms folded, a thick ring of keys dangling from his belt. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, his eyes puffy and bloodshot, but his voice was steady when he said, "Tonight, you'll learn about the basement." That should have been reassuring. Instead, my stomach knotted up. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. It wasn't official hospital stationery, not even a photocopy, just a crumpled sheet that looked like it had been rewritten by hand a dozen times. The ink bled in places, some words smudged, others underlined so hard the paper had nearly torn. At the top, in all caps, were the words, "Basement rules. Read carefully." I skimmed the first few lines and felt my mouth go dry. 1. If you hear children laughing, do not follow the sound. 2. Never mop past door number 6. 3. If the intercom clicks on but no one speaks, cover your ears immediately. I glanced up, expecting a smirk, some sign that this was a joke. Harold's face was stone. "What is this?" I asked. "The rules," he said simply. "They're not optional. Follow them and you'll be fine. Break them." He trailed off, and for the first time I noticed the faint tremor in his hands. I laughed, though it sounded thin and nervous. "This is hazing, right? You guys mess with the new hire, see how long he lasts." "You think I'm joking?" His voice sharpened. "Read every line. Don't pretend you didn't see it. People disappear down there. You follow the rules, you come back. That's the deal." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't a warning, it was a fact, delivered like weather. Rain falls, night comes, people disappear. The rest of the list wasn't any better. Rules about hallways that looped back on themselves, doors that weren't supposed to exist, lights that should never be switched off no matter how much they flickered. One line in particular made my chest tighten. If you see someone you know in the basement, keep walking. They don't belong here anymore. I wanted to crumple the paper and walk out, but Harold was watching me, waiting for my reaction, and pride got the better of me. I forced a shrug. "Fine, I'll play along." Not play, survive. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder and pressed the ring of keys into my palm. "You'll be starting tonight, midnight sharp, just you and the basement." I slipped the list into my pocket, trying not to let him see my hands shaking. The rest of the shift was almost insultingly ordinary. I scrubbed toilets, wiped down vending machines, emptied bins overflowing with latex gloves and paper masks. Everything smelled like bleach and sickness. The only unusual thing was the silence of the other staff. No one greeted me, no one joked or complained. They barely looked at me at all. It was as if once Harold had handed me the list, I'd become invisible. At one point, I passed another janitor in the hallway, a thin, gray-haired man pushing a squeaky cart. His eyes flicked to my pocket where the folded paper stuck out, then back to my face. For a moment, I thought he might say something. Instead, he muttered, almost too softly to hear, "Don't read it out loud." That did it. My heart pounded against my ribs. I wanted answers, but all I had were scraps of warnings and that damned piece of paper burning a hole in my pocket. I'll tell you what the rest of the rules said. I will, but not yet. You wouldn't believe me if I rattled them off now. And besides, reading them, even silently, made me feel like I was pulling something closer, like I was dragging the basement up into the light with me. For now, it's enough to know this. I had the list, I had the keys, and at midnight, for the first time, I was going down into that basement.
The basement stairs were steeper than I expected. Narrow, concrete steps that funneled me down into a breathless dark. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered with each step, and by the time I reached the landing, it felt like I'd descended into a different building entirely. The air was heavy, thicker somehow, laced with a sour undertone beneath the bleach and dust. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, like the sound had nowhere to go but back at me. I unfolded the paper from my pocket and forced myself to look at the first line. If you hear children laughing, do not follow. My lips twitched into a nervous smile. It was ridiculous. Creepy, sure, but ridiculous. The basement was nothing but long, sterile corridors lined with locked doors, some labeled storage, others with faded numbers stenciled in black. My job was simple: mop the floors, empty the bins, wipe down whatever surfaces collected dust. I could handle that. For the first hour, nothing happened. The hum of the overhead lights was constant, buzzing in my ears, occasionally dipping into a low drone like a dying fly. The silence in between was worse, pressing down until I found myself whistling under my breath just to fill it. Halfway down the hall, I thought I heard something faint, like the distant hum of machinery or maybe a voice too far away to understand. I froze, mop dripping onto the tile. The sound faded almost immediately, swallowed by silence. I told myself it was nothing. Old pipes, the building settling. Hospitals are full of strange noises, and if I jumped at every one, I'd never last the week. Still, I kept the rules in mind. My eyes lingered on door number 6 as I passed it, the brass number plate tarnished and dull. I didn't go near it. I didn't even let my mop touch the tiles in front of it. Maybe I was superstitious, but I wasn't about to tempt fate. As the night dragged on, the unease grew heavier. Every time I turned a corner, I expected someone or something to be standing at the far end of the hall. Shadows seemed to twitch when I wasn't looking at them directly. And once, when I bent to wring out my mop, I thought I felt eyes on me, the kind of prickling sensation that crawls up the back of your neck. But when I looked around, I was still alone. Just empty corridors, locked doors, and that endless buzz from the lights. By 3 a.m, I was convincing myself it was all in my head. Harold's rules were probably some sick joke passed around to freak out the rookies. I could already picture the staff laughing upstairs, waiting to hear how scared I'd been. I leaned on my mop, smirking at the thought. Children laughing. Sure, why not throw in a headless nurse while we're at it? The words echoed, bouncing too far, too sharp, as though someone else had repeated them back from down the hall. My smirk died. I stood there holding my breath, waiting for something, but nothing came. No laughter, no movement, just silence. By the time my shift ended, the basement was as empty as when I'd arrived. Not a single door creaked open, not a single intercom hissed to life, not a single rule had been tested. When I clocked out that morning, I told myself the rules were nothing more than hospital lore, a way to give guys like me goosebumps and keep us obedient. And for one night, it worked. But that was before night 2. On my second night, I descended the basement stairs with more confidence than I probably should have had. The first night had been nothing but shadows and my own nerves, and I told myself I wasn't going to let an old piece of paper dictate how I did my job. The corridors looked exactly the same. Dull gray walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the same damp chill that clung to my clothes. I pushed my mop bucket along, whistling under my breath, daring the silence to answer me back. When I reached door number 6, I stopped. The number plate looked darker than the others, as if it had soaked in years of grime no amount of polish could fix. The rule echoed in my mind: never mop past door number 6. Last night, I'd steered clear. Tonight, though, I couldn't resist. It wasn't bravery, exactly, more like stubbornness. I didn't like being played. If Harold and the rest of the staff wanted to spook me with campfire rules, fine, but I wasn't about to tiptoe around a door for the rest of my employment just because someone said so. I dipped the mop into the bucket and deliberately dragged it right across the floor in front of door number 6. The sound that followed was subtle at first, a faint scrape, like nails on the inside of a wall. I froze, mop hovering mid-stroke. The scrape came again, louder this time, unmistakably from behind the door. I stared at it, heart pounding, waiting for the knob to rattle or the hinges to creak. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door shifted, just a fraction, barely an inch, as though something had pressed against it from the other side. The mop slipped from my hands and clattered against the floor. I took a step back, pulse hammering, and that's when a voice spoke from behind me. "You shouldn't have done that." I spun around. A man in a dark uniform stood at the end of the hall, flashlight in one hand, badge clipped to his belt. A security guard. His face was hard, expression grim. I started, but he cut me off. "Don't joke about it," he said, striding toward me. "People disappear that way." The weight of his words hit harder than I expected. His tone wasn't mocking or playful. It was deadly serious. The kind of voice someone uses when they're warning a kid not to touch a live wire. "I didn't hear anything," I lied quickly, even though the echo of scratching still buzzed in my ears. The guard's eyes narrowed. "You heard it." I swallowed hard. "What's behind there?" He shook his head. "Not my job to explain, not yours to ask. All you need to know is the rules keep you alive. You follow them, you go home. That's it." Something in his voice made me believe him, more than Harold's half-muttered warnings ever had. He stepped closer, his flashlight beams skimming across the tarnished brass of door number 6. "There was another janitor here last month, a kid about your age. Thought the rules were funny, too. Tried to see what was inside. They never found him. Just his mop, lying right there." I glanced down at my own mop on the floor and felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. The guard's gaze locked on mine. "Whatever you do, don't test the rules again. You won't get a second chance." With that, he turned and walked away, the sound of his boots echoing until it faded into the distance. I stood frozen in front of door number 6, every nerve in my body screaming for me to run, but my legs rooted me to the spot. Finally, I snatched up the mop, shoved it back into the bucket, and forced myself to keep working, though my hands shook so badly the handle rattled against the tiles. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Every sound, every drip of water, every groan of the pipes felt amplified, sinister. I couldn't stop replaying the guard's words in my head. People disappear that way. By the time dawn broke and I climbed back upstairs, I was drenched in sweat, my nerves shot. I told myself I wouldn't go near that door again. I'd follow the damn rules to the letter, because that was the moment I realized the basement wasn't just storage. By the third night, I noticed the silence wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone else, too. The other janitors kept their distance. In most jobs, there's at least a little camaraderie among the maintenance crew. Some small talk over coffee, complaints about management. Not here. They barely met my eyes. And if I tried to strike up a conversation, I got nothing but mutters and excuses to leave. It was like I carried a shadow around with me, something they didn't want to brush against. I mentioned the rules once, just once, to the gray-haired man I'd seen pushing a cart earlier. "You had to deal with door number 6 too, right?" I asked, trying to sound casual. His hand froze on the cart handle. His eyes darted to the floor, and without a word, he turned and wheeled himself out of the hallway. The message was clear. No one was going to talk. Above ground, the hospital felt almost normal. Overworked, yes, but still human. Nurses barked orders, machines beeped, and families cried or prayed outside patient rooms. It was a world I recognized, even if it was tinged with exhaustion and fear. But the second I went below, it was different. The basement pressed in around me, every hallway too long, every corner too sharp. I began to notice things I'd missed before. Stains in the grout that looked too dark to be rust, patches of wall paint that seemed newer than the rest. And then there were the sounds, always just faint enough to question. A low humming that rose and fell like breathing, a whisper that stopped when I turned my head. That night, I pushed my cart past the service elevator when I caught voices echoing down the stairwell to my right. They weren't janitors. The tone was too clipped, too professional. I crept closer until I could make out the words. "Containment is stable as long as protocols are followed. Tell that to the family that asked why the wing is still sealed. Let administration handle them. Our job is to keep it below." I leaned forward, straining to hear more, but the stairwell door slammed shut before I could. My pulse raced. Containment. Sealed wing. Whatever was down here, it wasn't just pipes and old storage. Later, while mopping a corridor that seemed longer than it should have been, I heard a sound that froze me in place. The shuffle of bare feet against tile. At first, I thought it was another janitor, but when I looked up, I saw a man standing in the dim light ahead. He wore a hospital gown, the ties hanging loose, his skin pale as wax, his head logged to one side like his neck couldn't support it. "Sir," I called, my voice shaking, "you're not supposed to be down here." He didn't answer. He just stood there, swaying slightly, eyes fixed on me. The rules list burned in my pocket. "If you see someone you know in the basement, keep walking." I didn't know him, but the words still pounded in my head. "Can I help you get back upstairs?" I asked, taking a cautious step forward. That's when he smiled. Not wide, not friendly, just a twitch of his lips, too slow, too deliberate. And then he whispered my name. Every hair on my body stood on end. I hadn't told him my name. I hadn't told anyone down here my name. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and in the space of a blink, the man was gone. No footsteps, no retreating shadow, just gone. I abandoned the corridor and spent the rest of the shift clinging to the safer hallways. But the damage was done. The rules weren't superstition, they were survival. When dawn finally came and I trudged upstairs, I passed 2 doctors in hushed conversation. The old wing should have stayed sealed. Do you want another incident? Keep your voice down. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard, but the word stuck with me. An old wing, sealed in the 70s. I pictured door number 6, the man in the gown, the way he knew my name. What exactly were they keeping locked away down here? By the time I got home, sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling back to the folded paper in my pocket. Rules scrawled in ink. Warnings nobody would explain. You've been patient long enough. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating, making up details to scare you. Fine, but I'll prove it. I'll read them to you. Every line. Because you have to understand the kind of madness I was walking into.
I promised I'd read the rules, and if you're still with me after everything, you deserve to know them. I unfolded the paper, the edges worn soft from being shoved in my pocket shift after shift. The handwriting was messy, uneven, like someone had scrawled it in a hurry or with shaking hands. Here they are, word for word. Do not take the service elevator to the basement after 11:47 p.m. Use the stairs only. If you hear children laughing, do not follow. They are not children. Never mop past door number 6. If the water spreads on its own, let it. If you find the vending machine unplugged, leave it that way. Should the intercom click on and no one speaks, cover your ears immediately and wait 60 seconds. Do not listen. If you see someone you know in the basement, keep walking. Do not speak to them. The light in corridor B will sometimes flicker in 3s. When it does, stand still. Do not breathe until it stops. If you smell cigarette smoke, turn around and go back the way you came. He is near. On Tuesdays, the clocks in the basement may be wrong. Ignore them. Time runs differently down here. If a patient in a gown asks you for directions, do not answer. They are not lost. You are. If the humming grows louder, do not hum back. It will hear you. Do not clean room 3A, ever. The door is locked for a reason. If you hear your name whispered, resist the urge to look. It will look like you, but it won't be. The janitor's closet by the laundry chute must stay locked. If you find it open, close it without looking inside. When the elevator dings twice, but no one gets off, don't investigate. Keep mopping. If your mopwire turns red, stop immediately. Leave the bucket behind and walk upstairs. Should you feel a hand on your shoulder, do not turn around. Finish your task and the hand will leave. If you hear someone crying softly, follow the sound only if it's before midnight. After midnight, don't. If you see the old woman in a wheelchair, step aside. She has the right of way. Do not speak to her. Never, under any circumstances, whistle in the basement. And then there was the last one. The handwriting was smaller, almost cramped. The ink smudged like the writer had pressed too hard. My eyes stuck on it, my throat tightening. I can't. Not yet. Even reading the others, I feel like I've broken something, like I've pulled back a curtain that was never supposed to move. So let me leave it here, with you hanging the same way I was, knowing there's one more rule, one more warning, but not knowing what it says. Because back then, I couldn't bring myself to read it either.
I wish I could say I was careful, that I followed every line of that cursed list like it was scripture. But hospitals don't give you the luxury of control. They break you down with noise, endless motion, things slipping through the cracks. And that's when it got me, when I slipped. It was a Thursday, a little after midnight, and the basement was colder than usual. My mop bucket wheels squeaked against the tiles, echoing too loud in the empty corridors. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry flies.
I told myself it was just another night. Routine. And then the intercom clicked. Not the one upstairs at the nurse's station, the basement intercom. A static pop cracked through the silence, sharp enough to make me flinch. The rules came screaming back into my head. If the intercom clicks on and no one speaks, cover your ears immediately. I froze, staring at the metal speaker grill on the ceiling like it was a predator waiting to pounce. I should have obeyed. I should have slapped my hands to my ears and counted, but I hesitated. I wanted to know. I needed to know. The static held for a long moment, buzzing like a swarm of bees in a jar. Then, beneath it, something shifted, like words struggling to form. Not a voice exactly, but a shape of one. The syllables dragged out, long and wet, too low to be fully human. And then it spoke. My name. Whispered, but perfectly clear. I stumbled back, knocking the mop bucket, water spilling in a thin wave across the tiles. My heart punched against my ribs. There was no one else down there. No one alive should have known me by name. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. That's when I saw movement at the end of the corridor. A patient gown, white, smeared with something dark, dragging against the floor. A shape hunched low, arms too long, elbows bent backwards as it crawled. Its head twitched with every jerky shuffle, as if it wasn't entirely connected to the rest of its body. Its hair was patchy, clumps missing, skin pale and damp. And yet, it looked like someone familiar. I swallowed hard. "Sir, you're not supposed to be down here." My voice cracked in the middle. The figure stopped. Slowly, impossibly slow, its head turned toward me. And I saw its face. It wasn't a patient. It wasn't a person. Its eyes were bottomless holes, sockets weeping black streaks down its cheeks. Its lips twitched like they'd been stitched together and ripped back open. It smiled anyway. "You," it hissed. The sound rattled the intercom at the same time, like the voice came from its mouth and the ceiling above. "You shouldn't have come here." Every instinct screamed at me to run. I backed away, my sneakers squealing on the wet floor, but the water I'd spilled followed me, dragging thin ripples toward the thing like it was being pulled by gravity. The intercom buzzed again, louder this time, a horrible screech that drilled straight into my skull. I slapped my hands over my ears too late, pain blooming sharp in my temples. The thing crawled closer, each movement cracking joints, bones clicking like loose marbles in a jar. My name spilled from its mouth again and again, distorted, broken, as though it was trying out the sound for the first time. "Your name, your name, your name." I bolted. I don't remember choosing to, my body just took over. I ran up the hallway, mop abandoned, shoes splashing through water. Behind me, the intercom screeched, my name twisting into something alien, a chorus of static and rot. I slammed through the stairwell door, not caring how loud it was, and scrambled up the steps 2 at a time. My lungs burned, my vision spotted. By the time I reached the first floor, my knees were jelly, my chest heaving like I'd drowned. The hallway above ground smelled of bleach and medicine. It should have been comfortable, normal. But it wasn't. I felt that thing pressing at the edges of my mind, like it had left fingerprints on my thoughts. I leaned against the wall, trembling. I couldn't do it again. I couldn't go back down there. I thought about quitting on the spot, storming into HR, tearing that cursed rule list in half. But the image of rent notices piling on my table stopped me. The look in my supervisor's eyes the first day flashed across my mind. The weight behind the rules. The way the others never asked questions. I couldn't leave. Not yet. That's the moment I understood. The rules weren't guidelines. They weren't superstition. They were a leash, and if I let go, something was already waiting to drag me into the dark. And now, it knew my name.
The next few nights, I moved like a ghost. I cleaned floors, emptied bins, nodded at the nurses, and kept my mouth shut. But my head was a storm I couldn't calm. Every sound in the basement, it wasn't just sound anymore. It was meaning, a hum, a whisper, my name. I needed answers, and I started finding them in places I wasn't supposed to look. The hospital's archives were tucked away on the second floor, locked in a metal cabinet nobody touched anymore. Old blueprints, renovation permits, records half rotted from damp. I snuck a glance one night while the floor was empty, telling myself I'd be quick. That's when I saw it. The foundation of the hospital wasn't just concrete and pipes. Underneath, drawn faintly in pencil like someone had tried to erase it, were tunnels. A latticework spreading out beneath the building like veins. Some led to sealed wings, others led nowhere at all. And at the very center, a chamber marked with a single word, morgue. But not the one upstairs, not the official one families used. This was deeper, older, and someone had scribbled over it in red ink, "Don't reopen." I shoved the folder back and slammed the drawer shut before anyone caught me. But I couldn't unsee it. The pieces started connecting. The whispers about containment, the way other janitors never made eye contact when I mentioned the basement. The rules, not warnings, not jokes, but boundaries, a cage. And then there was what my supervisor told me. It was after my 5th night, after I came up pale and shaken again, sweating through my uniform. He stopped me outside the staff exit, his hand on my shoulder heavy like a weight pressing me down. "You saw something," he said flatly. I didn't answer, but I guess my face did. He sighed, almost tired. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." I asked him what the hell that meant, and that's when he told me. The hospital was built over an asylum, not the kind that you see in history books, the kind they pretend never existed. Underground wards, patients they didn't want the public to know about, experiments, torture dressed up as treatment. In the 1940s, they shut it down, or rather, they tried to. They buried it. Brick, concrete, whole sections of the city's forgotten tunnels. They thought if they sealed the doors, it'd stay quiet. It didn't. He sighted his eyes back towards the stairwell. It didn't. I asked him why the basement smelled the way it did sometimes, thick, metallic, like the air had spoiled. He didn't blink, because it still breathes. The words made my stomach turn. I wanted to laugh, to call him insane, but the memory of that thing dragging itself across the tiles stopped me cold. I asked him, why us? Why janitors? His expression darkened. Because no one looks twice at us. We're replaceable, disposable. He lowered his voice as if the shadows in the parking lot might be listening. You ever wonder why the pay's so good for a job like this? Why turnover's so high? It's not about cleaning, it's about keeping the rules. As long as someone's down there following them, it stays contained. I felt something hollow open in my chest. We weren't staff. We weren't workers. We were sacrifices that could clock in. You're saying... My throat locked up. If I quit? He cut me off. You don't quit. You get replaced. That's how they keep the cycle running. The
The way he said they, like it wasn't the hospital itself, but something higher, something faceless, I couldn't shake it. I pressed him for more, desperate, but his face hardened. Don't dig deeper. You don't want to know what's underneath all this. And then he added almost to himself, the rules keep it contained. For now. That phrase lodged in my brain like a splinter. For now. Meaning one day they might not be enough. When I got home, I pulled the rule list from my pocket. I spread it across my table, staring at every line like it might rearrange itself into something new. But that night, I noticed something I hadn't before. The last rule, the bottom of the page, wasn't just smudged or faded. It was gone, deliberately scraped away as if someone had pressed hard with an eraser until the paper thinned. Rule 13, missing. Not forgotten, erased. And suddenly I understood. Whatever that final rule was, it wasn't for keeping me safe. It was for keeping them safe from me finding out about it. And that's when the real fear set in. Because if I didn't know the last rule, sooner or later, I was bound to break it.
I didn't sleep for days. Not real sleep, anyway. Just long, twitching hours staring at the ceiling, replaying the erased space at the bottom of that page in my mind. Rule 13. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I searched every file I could access, dug through cleaning supply closets for old copies, scratched out lists, notes left by the janitors who'd vanished. Nothing. Just smudges, scrapes, whiteout like a wound across the paper. But the basement? It seemed to know what I was looking for. The nights grew stranger, hungrier. The intercom clicked more often. The shadows stretched too far down the hall. Once, I swear I saw the lights spell something across the ceiling, faint flickers, like Morse code, before they died out. If you've listened this far, you probably think you know how my story ends, that maybe I stepped off that elevator into hell, or maybe I never came back at all. Truth is, I'm not sure either, because the nights don't make sense anymore. Time folds in on itself down there. Sometimes I blink and it's still 3:33. Sometimes hours pass and I'm right back in front of those steel doors, like I never left. What I do know is this: hospitals don't stop running. And to keep running, they need people like me. People desperate enough to take the job without asking too many questions. That's why I'm telling you this. Not for sympathy, not for forgiveness. I'm telling you because sooner or later, someone's gonna tap you on the shoulder and hand you a clipboard. They'll smile like they're doing you a favor. They'll promise steady pay, night hours, benefits if you stick around long enough. They'll hand you a mop and a badge, and maybe, if they trust you, the list. And when they do, you'll think of this story. You'll think I was just another voice on the internet, spinning something spooky to pass the time, but in the back of your head, late at night, you'll remember how I sounded when I said, "Don't take the job." I wish someone had warned me. I keep thinking about the other janitors, the ones who stopped showing up, the ones whose names nobody remembers. I used to wonder why they never said anything, why they just vanished. Now I think I know. Maybe they tried, but the words got swallowed up. Maybe the elevator kept them, or maybe once you write it, you stop belonging to the world upstairs at all. And that's the part that scares me most. I don't know which side of that line I'm standing on anymore. Sometimes I wake up in my own bed, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, thinking I've escaped. Other times, I open my eyes, and the air tastes like bleach, and the buzzing of lights tells me I never left the basement at all. I can't tell which version is real. Maybe both are. Maybe neither. But the rules, they never stop following me. Even now, I hear them whisper in the hum of the air vent, etched into the ringing in my ears. Don't look into the stairwell. Don't mop past door 6. Don't run from the elevator. And every time that last one repeats, I feel the ground tremble beneath me. I feel the wall shift like the hospital is breathing. I know what that means. It means
The elevator's coming back. If you're smart, you'll forget this story. If you're lucky, you'll never smell the sour bleach, never hear the hum of fluorescent lights flicker awake at 3:33 in the morning. And if you're unlucky, if someone hands you that job offer, you'll remember my voice, whispering through the static. Don't sign your name. Don't pick up the mop. Don't take the badge. Because once you do, the basement already knows you. And once the basement knows you, it never lets go. Wait. Do you hear that? That grinding sound, steel cables groaning, the bell ringing through the concrete? It's here again. The doors are opening, and this time, I don't think they're waiting for me.